Mary?
I'm ready. Are you ready for me?
Yes, we can hear you. The room is ready. We've got your slides on, so you've got the controls, and take it away.
Yep, I'm sharing my desktop. Hello, everybody. I'm Mary Burns. I'm the Objective 5 lead, and I apologize for not being there. I'm actually in Guadalajara, Mexico at an OAS conference. I'm actually wondering if you can hear me.
We can hear you.
Yes.
Do you hear us?
Okay, I'm in the process of losing my voice because I'm sick, so I'm hoping I have instead of sounding like a 13-year-old boy, I sound more like Jessica Rabbit and Who Shot Roger Rabbit. But anyway, I wanted to go through and talk to you a little bit about Objective 5, which is professional development objective, and to figure out the sort of what's and hows of professional development. I began with an overall mapping of the current USAID professional development landscape, and you can see some of the things I did here on this slide. So I conducted interviews with about 21 USAID and implementing partner staff, some of whom come from the organizations that are represented in the room where you are. So all interviews were transcribed and coded, and major themes were defined and ranked, and all of this actually informs professional development for year one. So as you can see from this chart, of all the areas that USAID and implementing partner staff identified as really critical for professional development.
Mary, it's
support,
trying to
the
come
largest
through.
by far was working in conflict and crisis settings, and there's obviously no surprise there. And this was followed by two other large areas, which I'll come back to, but identify now. And one was education, also probably no surprise there, and project management. So working in conflict and crisis is obviously very, very broad. But the informants, the people I interviewed, spoke of several sub-areas that were very important areas for future professional development and support. And you can see them here, things like conflict sensitivity by far was the largest, doing monitoring and evaluation of crisis and conflict. And the third area that I ranked based on all my interviews was much more personal. It was how do folks actually deal with working in conflict and crisis. And Jim brought up some of this earlier in his talk. How do you manage your expectations? How do you deal with issues of personal safety? How do you feel like you're getting some how do you deal with a sense of efficacy in environments that are really chaotic and out of control? So this focus on conflict and crisis really will be the main focus of the professional development, and our main focus for the next couple of months. And it'll really impact the remainder of year one professional development activities. So we're right now in the process, and I'll be working very closely with Jim on this, as he said, in developing a 3-day series of activities, which we're going to field test in Nigeria, so that we have the opportunity to hear from colleagues in Nigeria, such as USAID staff and Creative Associates partners. Our goal is really to have one professional development opportunity available for the summit in November, and with some elements focused on USAID folks and some professional development for implementing agency staff. And so part of this professional development design will involve in fact, it is involving looking at USAID's existing online course on conflict and crisis to see where there's convergence. And also I'll be consulting a lot with other members of the ECCN team, people like Jim, whom I've mentioned, like Ash and Shai and others. So, excuse me, another key theme that emerged from my interviews was a much greater need to understand what Goal 3 is, for example, what it is, what language is, how to measure outcomes. And so that understanding Goal 3 really will factor into all of the ECCN professional development in a very cross-cutting and foundational way. So the focus for the next couple of quarters, next few months, as I mentioned, is on professional development and conflict and crisis. And there's other work as well, listing professional development priority areas, which we've done, coming up with a professional development strategy and plan for years 2 through 5. And I don't know who said this, but I think this is a very important point. As someone who, as a teacher, got lots of professional development that wasn't always useful and was often onerous, is we want to work very carefully with USAID in Washington and with folks in the field to make sure that what we're doing is adding value versus adding burdens. And then we want to come up with a mechanism for assessing the effectiveness. I wrote addressing here, but it's actually assessing the effectiveness of professional development activities. So the professional development in our original work plan focused on 2 main topics. You can see them here, essentially effective program management in Goal 3 countries, and then working on theories of change within conflict and crisis settings. And these two original activities that are in our work plan will be modified, again, based on our interviews with USAID and implementing partner staff, to focus on some of the priority areas around conflict and crisis that we saw earlier in a chart I showed: conflict sensitivity, working in conflict and crisis, M&E in conflict and crisis. And because working in conflict and crisis is a common denominator among everyone in the UCCN community, we want to begin to design an online version of this course so that we can integrate it with or use it as a complement to USAID's existing conflict and crisis course. And that way we can reach out to as many people as possible in the community. And ultimately, our plan is to do our best to make a variety of professional development modalities as available as possible to as many people as possible, whether they're online or some kind of technology, other forms of technology-based PD, or just face-to-face workshops. So in terms of year 2 activities, I'll just take you back to the first graph that I showed you earlier of what informants said were the greatest professional development needs. So one was working in conflict and crisis, which I've discussed. A second area was education, and this was in conflict and crisis and apart from conflict and crisis. And the people I interviewed really talked about the importance of having and needing strong technical knowledge in the education field. For example, what is good professional development? I think Ash alluded to something earlier about teacher training. What are good literacy instruction strategies, etc. And the third area is project management. And you can see understanding Goal 3 as well here, which I've mentioned will be foundational to all of our professional development. So in terms of proposed year 2 activities, right now I really see 3. So there's education in conflict. So education in conflict and crisis is what this is about, but there's really 2 pieces to that. There's the education in the conflict and crisis piece, which I've capitalized here, the conflict and crisis component, which is so important. And then there's also the education component. And when I was interviewing people this spring, both sides of that, if you think of it as a seesaw, both sides of that equation were quite important, the conflict and crisis piece and the education piece, as separate entities and together. And so there's also, so we'll focus on education and conflict and crisis, obviously, and project management, Goal 3 countries, which is an important theme. And here I see UCCN having much more of an instructional design and maybe brokering role, where we leverage knowledge of successful USAID project directors in Goal 3 countries and get them to disseminate and share what they've learned and the successes they've had working in Goal 3 countries. So I'm sure you have some questions for me, so I'll stop and let you ask those. And I obviously have a question for you, which I've put up here, but I'll wait to hear what you have to ask me first.
I have a question, and it's mostly for us.
Sure.
And this is touching on what Saji mentioned earlier this morning. For us, you know, for USAID to invest in professional development, it's a big investment. It's something we know we need to do. And it's something that we have varying success rates at. And so I think it's really important to discuss, these are still pretty broad topics, and drilling down to the learning objectives is going to be very important. And also making sure that we share with each other from our different organizations what have been successful approaches, learning objectives, etc., and what has not been successful. Because if I look backwards a little bit in terms of the professional development that we have embarked on, doing big, broad courses on education and Goal 3 has not been successful. And so really, so I think that we want to be able to engage with the members of ECCN to really sort of dig deep into our own organizational experiences with professional development in this area and think about what we've learned and what has worked and what hasn't worked.
I have a question to that. I mean, so you're going up to Nigeria to do the first.
Mm-hmm.
So to what extent are the modules general versus really looking at the situation on the ground in northern Nigeria and doing training, from that perspective?
Meaning like more customized. Yeah.
It's a mix.
Mm-hmm.
It is,
So,
okay.
so part with the process, the place where we are right now with the Nigeria Field Workshop is that we've just now begun to engage with the mission and I believe with the implementing partners about what would work for them. What do they want to go deep into? What do they have to share that they feel they want to get out there that others need to know? As well as what do they want to understand better? And the understanding better part has two pieces to it. One, I think you might have heard earlier, is this recognition that people want to learn from one another first and foremost. So they want to hear from their colleagues and their peers about what has worked for them in this particular context and very similar contexts. And at the same time, if there are pieces that nobody there has expertise in that they want to drill down on, and that could be education content, it could be more specifically about peace building or whatever the category is, we would then try to pull that together ahead of time, come with some material, and then work with them to make it as meaningful as possible. So it's a little bit of both.
Just an
I
observation.
just want to add that we're in an organization that's large and diverse, it's USAID, and every Goal 3 country is different. I mean, even the Room to Read countries narrows down the Goal 3 countries, but they're different, and people have very different professional development needs, and yet there are organizational priorities, and that's always a struggle with professional development, is how do you balance really tailoring PD that's extremely useful and targeted for people with larger organizational mandates. I don't have an answer for that right now. I mean, that's what we will be embarking on this process. But I think one of the keys will be, if we are able to do this, is engaging in as many different modalities as possible, because then you can get to some of that differentiation that really is at the heart of good professional development. And by modalities, I mean, a variety of media, whether it's text, maybe less that, video, audio, and then, whether it's online, face-to-face, maybe some kind of a MOOC that people can drop into or drop out of as they feel they need. I'm sorry, I hope you guys can hear me.
We can.
Yeah. I wanted to make the observation that over years of working on PD with the Africa Bureau, that the combination of having people on the ground in the field be able to share information with each other around a collective focus that was informed by international experience and good research seems to always have been what worked in PD. And it took a long time to get the right mix of that, but one of the things is, reminds me, Abby, what you were saying, people tend to believe in each other's experience more than they do on published academic literature, no matter how rigorous that literature may be. And that is because context matters, and they can learn from each other's context, but somehow bringing that connectivity is what we need to find the architecture and the means for doing that here. And so it's on our agenda. We don't have the answer, but it's very, again, you've got to get people who are experienced on the ground and who are doing that work, who can talk to each other around that focused context and informed by international best practice. So
Yeah,
that's
and
what
that's
we
to
hope
reiterate Ash's point, because there's obviously I had much more data that was presented here in terms of my mapping of professional development. It is probably the biggest thing I heard from, especially USAID folks, was they really want to hear from their colleagues. They want to meet with their colleagues. They want time to work with colleagues. They want to learn from colleagues. They want professionals. They're not interested, the people I talk to, in learning about concepts. They're interested in learning how to be doing things. And they want, without ever saying this, but they all refer to what is essentially best practice in adult learning and professional development, things that are very relevant, that are very hands-on, that are very active. So, I don't know how much time is left because I'm an hour behind you, but it looks like at some point you'll go to lunch. But I wanted to ask you, what resources or people or organizations should ECCN be reaching out to in terms of this professional development?
I think the Goal 1 community practice, they're doing a lot of these EGRA workshops. The last year, every 3-4 months, they've been doing stuff very visible and I think beneficial to USAID staff, but also implementing agencies and our local staff as well. So I'm not sure if they've done an evaluation to see how, because Nina, you made reference that you've done some things like this in the past for Goal 3, but I don't think I've seen.
It was a while before you started.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you just, okay. So but I don't know what the evaluation is for Goal 1, but that's been high visibility, and it's called URC is the agency that's running the Goal 1 community practice.
And is that's Jane Benbow's group? I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I'm not hearing very well.
Exactly.
Is that Jane Benbow's group, the Goal 1 theory of
Yeah,
community practice?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I've actually had some talks with them, but thank you, that's a great. Other folks, because, I recognize and we recognize there's just great work already being done out there.
We have a few people.
Yeah, part of the professional development is teaching tools and ideas and sharing research and information at the technical level for people who are technical implementers. But part of it, again, if our goal over time is increased access in crisis and conflict situations, and we're looking to change, we're trying to make change happen, we may also want to think about at ECCN sensitization for people who are not technical officers, but for people who control resources and who make decisions about programs. In an aid mission, that can be senior mission management and program officers who are not going to be implementing, but who you need to really understand this stuff because they're the ones who ultimately make decisions about what a mission's going to do. So you wouldn't do necessarily the same level of technical input, but enough so that directors get excited about it and program officers understand it when it comes time to write a new country strategy. And also within the aid context, really not only looking just at education officers, but since they're always moving every 2, 3, or 4 years, getting the FSNs who stay behind really up to speed on this, and in some cases they're more important than the actual direct hires themselves because they're the ones that will be staying on.
Actually, Joel, that's fine.
Those are two themes that came out really strongly in my interviews, actually. But it's good to have that emphasized again.
Actually, just to add to bringing in to the PD experience contract officers can be extraordinarily helpful in getting them to understand the particular contexts and issues that have to be addressed in the way contracts are designed. And having them hear from implementing partners, I mean, straightforward. Because you can't do that once you have, once you're in a contractual relationship, you can't tell the contract officer what you think of them. So doing this.
Ain't that the truth?
But having an environment in which you can actually talk about these things and really get into them is very helpful. So I hope we can facilitate that.
Do you have a class in Washington Learning Center?
So we're building now our
really?
professional development.
Okay, but never done that in the past in the
There-
Washington.
We had a course in the past.
Oh, you
We
did?
did, yeah, yeah.
Just a couple of quick reactions. I think one is we're interested to partner with an academic institution to could be like a certification itself, but local as well as the other individuals. So you're professionalizing it more than just giving a training itself, and that takes a psychologically, ups the ante for them as well itself. The other idea is. Building on this community of learning and practice, I call it learning and practice, not just learning, at a local country level itself. So here's an opportunity for these officers to strengthen a cross-sectoral learning and practice community that brings together different agencies and individuals and young people and groups to think through these concepts even more. So the knowledge is not just coming from the top down at the country level, but it's also bottom up, and it's incentivizing people to do. Like, in the master's program, you're supposed to do a practicum. Here, someone who is getting a training is required to actually then start a learning community at a country level to feed the information back and forth that could, help in developing and strengthening our larger community of practice as well.
Well, that might be a nice angle for some of the knowledge share groups.
Yeah.
And for, again, for the field workshops, that we can kind of give it a push, and then we could maybe build something that would encourage them to keep going in some way. Yeah.
And there's one other thing I'd like to utilize this group for, and Mary, we haven't really talked about this, but I'm going to put it out there, is really trying to map out who the different target groups are for the professional development. It's tricky, and I think that there are trade-offs, right? And so there might be some professional development that's just internal to USAID because we have our own problems that we need to solve with the knowledge and skills, and we have opportunities too internally. But then there are benefits to having really sort of ECCN-wide professional development on certain topics. And then we have all kinds of hidden agendas there where we can actually have the cross-learning, the networking, all kinds of things. And I think that's something I'd like to at least have a little bit of a discussion while we're all together in the next 2 days in terms of what are some people's thoughts around that. Because it could get big, and it could be, maybe you have webinars where God and everyone can call into, but then you have a few things that are sort of internal where we start to build our own knowledge and skills, and then we have some things that are...
Has God been calling in?
Yes, he called.
She's facilitating.
But so, I think it's important to
That's on the 6th floor.
to talk about it.
Yeah. Can I add one thing to you, Ellen? I don't know how much time you would have as a steering committee group and as USAID folks in the next couple of days, but it's very apparent to me too that we need a why, because if people are told that they'll do professional development, they'll do it because they have to. If EDC sends me to something and tells me to do it, I'm going to do it, and I'll comply with it. But we don't always get commitment. We might get compliance, but we don't get commitment. And I think what we're looking at here is, especially as a community practice, is commitment. But from the work that I've done so far, I see the need for a much larger why. And I think that's maybe not something that each one of us individually can furnish in EDC or maybe USAID or the steering the ECCN community, but together I think to make this professional development work, because it really is about taking USAID priorities and sort of translating them into action. That we need a larger why, or at least I think seeing that we need a larger Y. WHY versus the 25th letter in the alphabet.
Maybe one final thing that I wanted to just put out there to let you think through as we'll come back to this tomorrow again. We did mention the Ed Summit, which is currently planned for November 2nd through the 4th. And you may or may not know that it's a 3-day public event, and then there are 2 days that are more USAID focused. The public event is basically set up right now to have one goal per day. So there will be an entire day, sort of a goal 3 day, which is a wonderful opportunity, I think. And it offers us, again, I think, a way to reach across all kinds of organizations and institutions, to reach a lot of people, but also to learn from them. Certainly on the support team, we are looking at that venue as an opportunity to unveil certain things and really, begin to launch this in a broader way than we have been able to. And I encourage all of us to think too, from the ECCN perspective, what does that mean for us as a network? How can we use that opportunity? What would our constituents want to know about? What would they want to share? And what happens after that meeting? So I think professional development figures large in it. So. Okay, thank you very much, Mary. I know it was very challenging to get the connection, and I really appreciate your sticking with us here. So.
Thank you all. And I was going to say, if you have any thoughts for me, because I really am interested in, I know there's great work being done out there. We're all in our silos sometimes, and it's hard to know what that is. And obviously this community is about breaking down those silos. But if you wanted to email me, I'm just mburns@edc.org. I'd really welcome your ideas and suggestions for resources and people and organizations. So thank you all.
Oh, Mary, you know what we didn't talk about? Do you still have a minute? Can we just say quickly about the Teacher Professional Development Knowledge Share Group?
Yeah, so we have obviously a knowledge share group, which I'd like to expand to be more about teachers and teacher professional development and teacher quality. Excuse me. We had some initial meetings in March at SICE, and then I've followed up with several emails since, and that's one of the things I'll get started on when I get back. But we have about 30 people now who seem to be interested in participating, and I think that would be a great place to be test driving and sharing some of professional development and everything, because I see professional development as the bottom of the funnel. The objectives 2 through 4 really flow down into that, and objective 5 is really what translates all of that work into information that's usable and actionable for people. So that's that's where we are on the knowledge share group. We've got some interested folks. I've done some outreach. I've heard about people's ideas, and I'll start following up on that when I get back next week.
Okay, thank you, Mary.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care.
Hope you feel better.
Okay, well, I think we're pretty much on time. Thank you, everyone.